Two teams on the 2026 grid race a rear wing that turns almost completely upside down at 300 kilometers an hour. One of them has never had a single failure. The other has now thrown Max Verstappen into the gravel twice in 8 days. And it is not the team you would guess. Everyone assumed Red Bull copied Ferrari. The truth is almost the exact opposite, and that inversion is the reason Verstappen's car keeps breaking. Because the decision Red Bull just made this week is being reported as a safety review. It is not. It is a confession. For the first time this season, Red Bull has publicly admitted that every option is on the table for the Belgian Grand Prix, including tearing this wing off the car entirely. But here is the real problem. Every single one of those options costs them something they cannot afford to lose. There is no safe choice left. There is only the least dangerous one. And to understand why a 4-time world champion is now trapped between speed and survival, you have to understand what this wing actually does, and why Red Bull's version of it is the most aggressive piece of aerodynamics on the entire grid. Start with the machine. In 2026, Formula One tore up its rulebook. The old drag reduction system, the one you knew for a decade, worked like a letterbox. A small flap cracked open on the straight to shed a little drag, then snapped shut for the corner. Simple limited the new rules, threw that away entirely. Instead of telling teams how the wing must open, the regulations now define only 2 positions, open and closed, and leave the engineers free to invent how the wing travels between them. And when you give the cleverest engineers on Earth that much freedom, someone always goes too far. Ferrari went first. In pre-season testing in Bahrain, the Scuderia revealed a rear wing that did not crack open like a letterbox. It rotated. The upper elements swung through such a violent arc, up to 270 degrees, that in motion it looked like the car was dancing down the straight. The paddock named it the Macarena wing. And the moment it appeared, everyone in the pit lane assumed that when Red Bull turned up with its own version, it had simply copied Ferrari's homework. That assumption is wrong, and the reason it is wrong is the reason we are here. Now watch this closely. According to Red Bull's own technical director, Pierre Wash, the inspiration did not come from Ferrari at all. Red Bull began developing its concept in November 2025, working from the same rulebook but arriving at a completely different machine. Ferrari's wing rotates one direction up to 270 degrees using a complex system with no central actuator hidden in the end plates, specifically so the airflow stays clean. Red Bull went the other way. Literally, its wing rotates in the opposite direction and it keeps a single actuator in the center. 2 teams, same rulebook, same 2 weeks in Miami. And by pure coincidence, they raced upside-down wings against each other for the first time in the same Grand Prix, having never copied a single line from one another. But the difference that matters is not the direction, it is the size of the hole. Red Bull's wing creates the largest opening on the entire grid. Think about what that means in plain terms. On the straight, this wing opens wider than anyone else's, which means it sheds more drag than anyone else's, which means the car is faster in a straight line than the concept allows for any of its rivals. Red Bull did not build a copy. It built the most extreme version of this idea that exists in Formula One. And that decision, made in a wind tunnel 8 months ago, is exactly what came back to bite Max Verstappen at 180 miles an hour. But we will come back to that, because first you need to see what the failure actually looks like from inside the cockpit. If you want the technical stories the big channels skip over, subscribe now, because this is where it gets serious. Picture Verstappen at Silverstone. He is on hangar straight, the wing wide open, drag gone, the car flying towards Stowe, a corner taken almost flat only because the air is pressing the car into the road with the force of several small cars stacked on the rear axle. Now here is what has to happen, and it has to happen perfectly. Before he turns in, that wing must rotate back to its closed position, and the air must reattach to its surface, restoring the downforce, restoring the grip, all in less than the blink of an eye. The rules give it 400 milliseconds. At Silverstone, the wing did not close in time, and the hand that was pressing the car into the road simply let go. Feel that for a second. One instant the rear of the car is glued down, unshakable. The next, it is weightless, floating, with nothing holding it to the track. There is no correction a driver can make, because there is nothing left to correct with. The car just leaves. Verstappen was running third when it happened. He had made no mistake. The car deleted him from the race, and 8 days earlier, in qualifying in Austria, almost the same thing, at almost the same kind of corner. Different fault, Red Bull insists. And that word, different, is where this gets genuinely frightening. Because in Austria, Red Bull said it understood the failure. It found the cause. It fixed it. Then, at the very next race, a completely different fault on the same wing produced the exact same result. You do not need to be an engineer to understand why that is so much worse. A problem you understand can be solved. A wing that finds a brand new way to fail every single weekend cannot be trusted at all. And trust, in Formula One, is not a soft word. It is the whole game. A driver commits to a corner like Stowe or Eau Rouge a fraction of a second before he arrives, on faith that the car will do what it did last lap. The instant that faith cracks, he lifts, he hesitates, he loses tenths he can never get back. So even a wing that only fails occasionally has already failed completely, because it has taken the one thing a driver cannot race without. Verstappen's own words afterward were blunt and repeated. Super dangerous. He said he had been lucky twice. And that word, lucky, is the one that should worry Red Bull most, because the next race is the one circuit on the calendar where luck runs out fastest. But hold that thought. Now here is the detail that reframes everything. Remember Ferrari, the team everyone thought Red Bull copied? Ferrari has raced its Macarena wing since Miami, across race after race, and has not suffered a single one of these failures. The team that supposedly invented the danger has been perfectly safe. The team that supposedly borrowed it keeps crashing. So ask yourself the question the whole paddock is quietly asking. If the concept itself were the problem, wouldn't both teams be failing? So what did Red Bull do differently? The answer goes straight back to that decision in the wind tunnel. The bigger the opening, the more aggressive the movement, the more violently that wing has to slam back into position before the corner. Red Bull chased the biggest drag reduction on the grid, and the price of the biggest opening may simply be the hardest landing. Red Bull's own technical director will not yet say that out loud, and there is a reason for his caution that tells you how deep this uncertainty runs. Laurent Mekies, the team principal, chose his words with surgical care. It is too early, he said, to establish whether it is an issue with the concept or something else. Read that carefully. Because those two possibilities lead to two completely different nightmares. If it is something else, a loose fastening, a faulty sensor, a manufacturing flaw, then Red Bull can fix it and keep its speed. But if it is the concept itself, if the very aggression that makes this wing fast is what makes it break, then there is no fix. There is only a choice between being fast and being safe, and you cannot be both. That is the decision Red Bull just made public, every option open. And now, you can see why that sentence is not reassuring. It is an admission that they do not yet know which nightmare they are living in. And this is where it gets worse. The next race is Spa-Francorchamps, the fastest, most fearsome circuit in Formula One. Home of Eau Rouge and Redillon, a flat-out uphill sweep where the car is loaded to its absolute limit and where a sudden loss of rear downforce does not end in a gravel trap. It ends against a barrier at a speed that has killed people. So put yourself in Verstappen's seat. Would you trust this wing through Eau Rouge after it has already thrown you off the road twice? Or would you demand they take it off, even if it costs you the race? Stay with us, because the decision Red Bull faces is far crueler than it looks. Here is the trap, laid out plainly. Red Bull has in effect two options for Spa, and both of them wound the team. Option 1, keep the wing. If they keep it and they are right, that the problem is fixed. Verstappen keeps his straight-line speed at a circuit that punishes drag more than almost any other. But if they are wrong, even slightly wrong, the next failure comes at Eau Rouge instead of Stowe. No team on earth can gamble a driver's safety on being mostly sure. Option 2. Take the wing off. Revert to the older, conventional rear wing they used at the start of the season. Safe, proven, predictable, but here is the part that makes this genuinely painful, and it is buried in the physics of the circuit itself. Spa is what engineers call an energy-starved circuit. Under the 2026 rules, the cars have to harvest and deploy electrical energy with brutal efficiency, and Spa's long straights drain the battery faster than almost anywhere. Now here is the cruel connection. Reducing drag is one of the most valuable things you can do at a circuit like Spa, because less drag means less energy wasted pushing through the air, which means more energy for everything else. The rotating wing is Red Bull's single best tool for reducing drag. So the very wing that might not be safe enough to race is also the one thing that could rescue Red Bull's biggest weakness at this exact track. Take it off, and they are slow in the one area they most needed to be fast. Keep it on, and they are gambling with Eau Rouge. That is not a decision. That is a punishment. And just when you think the walls could not close in any further, the governing body walked into the room. Now watch what happens next. The FIA has now formally contacted both Red Bull and Ferrari about their rotating wings. Not a protest from a rival, not a complaint. The sport's own safety authority asking questions after a 4-time world champion said on camera that he could have been seriously hurt. And the FIA's involvement exposes something extraordinary about how these wings are actually policed. The regulations demand that the wing complete its transition within 400 milliseconds, but here is the loophole hiding in plain sight. Meeting that time limit only proves the wing physically moved into position in time. It does not prove the airflow actually reattached. Read that again. A wing can pass every rule in the book, hit every deadline the FIA sets, and still leave a driver with no grip at the moment he turns in. The rule measures whether the flap arrived, it does not measure whether the car is safe. And that gap between the letter of the law and the physics of reality is exactly where Verstappen's crashes live. Which raises the possibility nobody at Red Bull wants to say aloud. The FIA has confirmed that in the most extreme scenario, it could ban this entire concept for the rest of this season or even for 2027. That is not the aim of the current investigation, and it is not on the table today. But the fact that it is even mentioned tells you how seriously the sport is taking this. Red Bull spent months building the most aggressive wing on the grid to claw back performance, and it may now watch the FIA legislate that advantage out of existence entirely. So who is really responsible here? Is it Red Bull for pushing the concept too far in search of speed? The FIA for writing a rule that measures the wrong thing? Or is this simply the price Formula One always pays when it hands engineers a blank page? There is no clean answer, and that is what makes this more than a story about one broken wing. Because the deeper pattern is the one nobody is connecting. McLaren has built its own rotating wing too. It brought it to Austria. And then it did something very revealing. It refused to run it. Not in the race. Not even in a single free practice session. McLaren looked at the same concept, decided it was not ready, and left it in the garage. While Red Bull was racing the most extreme version of this wing and crashing, its rival was quietly refusing to race a tamer one at all. That contrast is the whole story. One team chased the maximum and paid for it. The other waited. McLaren has since hinted the wing could finally make its debut at Spa. On the very weekend, Red Bull may be forced to take its own version off. Imagine that image, McLaren rolling out the rotating wing for the first time, cautiously, on the same Sunday Red Bull retreats from it in fear. Spa may be where we finally learn which approach was right. So the decision Red Bull just made is not really about a rear wing. It is about what a team is willing to risk when it is desperate to catch up. Red Bull is fourth in the Constructors' Championship. Its star driver is furious. His future is uncertain, and the one piece of technology that could help him is the same piece that keeps trying to hurt him. Whatever they choose for Spa, keep the wing and gamble, or remove it and surrender their best weapon at the worst possible track, they lose something. And the cruelest part is that both crashes and this entire impossible decision trace back to a single choice made in a wind tunnel in November, long before anyone knew it would matter. They chose the biggest opening. They chose the most speed. And in Formula One, the bill for the most speed always comes due. The only question left is whether it comes due in a gravel trap like Silverstone or somewhere far less forgiving. So tell me in the comments, should Red Bull race this wing at Spa or rip it off and take the performance hit? And if you want the real engineering behind the headlines, not just the drama, subscribe. Because the answer arrives the moment those cars hit Eau Rouge.